History is often written by the victors, etched in the ink of empires that sought to erase the very names of those who stood against them. For centuries, the story of Africa was told through the lens of discovery and conquest. But in the 17th century, on the red soils of West Central Africa, one woman forced the hand of history to pause. She was a diplomat, a tactician, a guerrilla commander, and a sovereign who refused to be a subject. This is the story of Ndongo Nzinga. To the Portuguese, she was a thorn in the side of the Atlantic slave trade. To her people, she was the Ndongo, the king who led from the front lines for 40 years. In a world where European powers viewed African leaders as mere suppliers of human merchandise, Nzinga demanded equality. She didn't just resist colonization. She outmaneuvered it, outstayed it, and outfought it. Today, we strip away the colonial myths. We move past the European caricatures of the cannibal queen or the lustful tyrant. We look at the records, the treaties, the letters, and the oral traditions to reconstruct the life of one of the most brilliant political minds the world has ever known. This is not a story of a victim. This is a story of power. In 1583, the kingdom of Ndongo was a powerhouse of the Mbandu people. It was a land of iron smelters and farmers, governed by a complex hierarchy under the Ndongo, the title for their king. It was into this world that Nzinga was born. Legend says her birth was difficult. She was born with the umbilical cord wrapped around her neck. In the Mbandu culture, this was a sign. They called her Nzinga from the verb kujinga, meaning to twist or to turn. The old women of the court whispered a prophecy. This child will grow up to be proud and powerful. Her father, Ndongo Kiluanji Kiasamba, recognized her intellect early. While her brother, Mbandi, was the heir apparent, Nzinga was the one who sat at her father's feet during councils of war. She learned the art of the jingatha, fluid, deceptive movement of the warrior. She was trained in the use of the hunga, the traditional battle axe, and she became a master of the Portuguese language, watching the strangers from the coast with a hawk's intensity. By the time Nzinga reached adulthood, the world was changing. The Portuguese had established the port of Luanda. They weren't just looking for gold anymore. They were looking for black ivory slaves. The kingdom of Ndongo sat directly in the path of the most brutal economic machine in human history. The Portuguese didn't want a neighbor. They wanted a vassal. And they were willing to tear and go apart to get it. The year is 1622. Ndongo is in crisis. Nzinga's father is dead. Her brother, Mbandi, is on the throne. But he is a weak ruler, besieged by Portuguese raids and internal rebellions. Desperate, he sends his most capable weapon to Luanda to negotiate peace. He sends Nzinga. This is the moment that defined her legacy. The Portuguese governor intended to humiliate her. In his mind, an African woman, no matter her rank, should sit on the floor like a servant. Nzinga didn't hesitate. She didn't argue. She made a gesture to one of her attendants. The attendant drops to all fours, creating a human throne. Nzinga sits on the attendant's back, bringing herself level with the governor's eye line. In that one movement, she signaled to the Portuguese, "I am not your subject, I am your equal." She spoke to the governor in fluent Portuguese, debating international law and territorial boundaries. She negotiated the return of Ndongo's prisoners and the withdrawal of Portuguese forts from her land. To seal the treaty, she agreed to be baptized. She took the name Dona Ana de Souza. Was it a genuine conversion? Most historians believe it was a masterstroke of realpolitik. By becoming a Christian, she neutralized the Portuguese excuse for holy war. She became a sister in Christ to the King of Portugal, making any further attack on her land a violation of the Church's own laws. She left Luanda with a treaty in hand. But the Portuguese soon realized they hadn't met a puppet. They had met their greatest nightmare. Peace lasted less than 2 years. The Portuguese governor was greedy, and the demand for slaves in Brazil was skyrocketing. They betrayed the treaty. In the chaos that followed, Nzinga's brother, the Angela Mbandi, died under mysterious circumstances. Some say he took his own life in shame. Others whisper that Nzinga poisoned him to save the kingdom from his incompetence. Whatever the truth, in 1624, Nzinga Mbandi stood before her people and claimed the title of Angola. The Portuguese refused to recognize her. They placed a puppet, a man named Adi Kiluangi, on the throne. To the colonizers, Nzinga was now a fugitive. But to the people of Ndongo, she was the only legitimate power. She realized Ndongo was too exposed. She made a radical strategic decision. She led her people east. In 1361, Nzinga conquered the neighboring kingdom of Matamba. She didn't just occupy it, she transformed it. Matamba became a sanctuary for runaway slaves. It became a fortress of resistance. But Nzinga knew that grit wasn't enough. She needed a new kind of army. She did the unthinkable. She formed an alliance with the Mbangola vicious mercenary bands who lived outside the traditional laws of the Mbandu. She adopted their military tactics, integrated their rituals, and built a professional army that was mobile, ruthless, and loyal only to her. She was no longer just a queen in exile. She was a warlord. Nzinga was a master of the enemy of my enemy. When the Dutch West India Company seized Luanda from the Portuguese in 1641, Nzinga didn't hide. She sent an embassy to the Dutch immediately. She proposed an alliance. She would provide the ground troops. The Dutch would provide the naval support and firearms. For the next 7 years, Nzinga led a combined force that brought the Portuguese Empire to its knees in West Africa. At the Battle of Combi in 1647, Nzinga's forces, alongside her Dutch allies, crushed the Portuguese army. It was one of the greatest military defeats Portugal ever suffered in Africa. Nzinga herself was in her 60s, yet reports from the time say she moved with the energy of a woman half her age, directing her troops with a silver whistle. She was so close to driving the Portuguese out of Africa forever. But global politics shifted. In 1648, Portuguese reinforcements arrived from Brazil. The Dutch, seeing their profits at risk elsewhere, abandoned their African ally. Nzinga was left to face the full might of the Portuguese Empire alone. The Portuguese thought they could finally break her. They hunted her through the mountains for years. They called her a witch. They tried to assassinate her. They failed. Every time, Nzinga realized that a total military victory was no longer possible. But she also knew the Portuguese were exhausted. Their economy was bleeding out from decades of war. In 1656, at the age of 73, Nzinga forced the Portuguese back to the negotiating table. This wasn't a surrender. It was a stalemate on her terms. The treaty recognized her as the independent queen of Matamba. It ended the tribute her kingdom was forced to pay. She had done what no other African monarch of her era managed. She survived them. In her final years, she returned to the church, perhaps to ensure the treaty held after her death. She died on December 17, 1663, at the age of 80. In an era where most rulers died by the sword before 40. Nzinga died in her bed, a sovereign in her own land. For centuries, colonial historians tried to bury Nzinga. They focused on rumors of her having a male harem or participating in cannibalistic ritual stories designed to paint African power as monstrous. But they couldn't bury the truth. Nzinga Mbandi was a pioneer of African nationalism. She saw the threat of colonization before it had a name. She understood that power wasn't just about spears. It was about literacy, diplomacy, and the ability to pivot in a changing world. Today, she is a symbol of resistance for the entire African diaspora. In Brazil, her name is invoked in capoeira circles. In Angola, she is the mother of the nation. She teaches us that resilience is not just about standing still. It's about twisting through the obstacles. It's about the Nzinga. It's about knowing that even when the world tries to take your seat at the table, you can always build your own throne. She was Nzinga, the Angola, the lioness, and her roar still echoes across the Kwanzaa today.